Hey you guys, you have reached Author Mama Reads. Today I'm going to talk to you about Love Comes Softly. If you haven't heard of the books, I'm sure you've heard of the Hallmark movies. I'd be surprised if you didn't know the Hallmark movies came from the books. Anyway, Janette Oke is the author. She was born in 1935 and as far as I know is still writing. She writes actually with another author, Davis Bunn, and they do a lot of co-authored books, and I believe also she has done some co-writing with her daughter. Janette Oke is a Canadian authoress. She is practically pioneered the Christian fiction genre, if nobody knows that. I really wasn't aware of that until my mother mentioned it. And then I posted something on Facebook, and then a bunch of other people chimed in as well. I found some stuff on the internet, super interesting. She actually started out writing some poetry for her mother. Her mother loved it, showed it off. Janette Oke always liked writing. She decided to wait to write until her kids were in their teens, which she did. It took her like 3 weeks to write Love Comes Softly because she'd been like having this story in her head for so long. Eventually she tried to publish it. She went to Bantam Books, didn't really get anything there. She got rejected, and then eventually she went with Bethany Fellowship Incorporated. Actually, she was invited to publish with them, so the story goes, and she was, I believe, also their first Christian fiction novel, or fiction at all, Christian fiction. I think they only did nonfiction at the time. If you go to CanadianChristianLeaders.org under Janette Oke, you can find this information. It's really interesting. I will post it in the description so that you can read it for yourself. As a Christian woman, as the wife of a pastor, she just really wanted to write good romance that had Christian themes. Even people who would come to the Lord through the testimony of others. And that's what happens in this story. To give you a quick synopsis, Marty is coming out west. She's married, she's pregnant. Nobody really knows she's pregnant yet. Her husband dies. This is not a spoiler. This is like first chapter material. And this is the setup. And basically she doesn't have a way to get back out east, and so there's a marriage of convenience. And this man has a baby daughter. His wife died, and he just sort of says, will you come and be a mother to my daughter? This is a platonic relationship I'm asking for right now. He wasn't ready for a wife, really, but he couldn't raise his daughter Missy on his own anymore because he had to plant and harvest and do all the stuff that farmers have to do. And he said, and then at the end of your time with me, like maybe come spring, I will pay for your way back and we can basically get an annulment. Now, there's some little plot holes. I don't know if you can get an annulment that easily or what the stigma would be about getting your marriage annulled, even if you hadn't copulated. Is that the word? But that aside, you have to have a setup for your story. So there's certain things that you can just waive. There were things that some people on the 1- and 2-star reviews, which let me just add, were only 1% of the reviews for either of those. Some of the things that they brought up were, let's say there was a barn that burned down, but some things that she left out were, why did the barn burn down? They never gave a reason or how it happened. There was also another person who died. They never actually told you how she died. To be fair, the characters didn't know how she died, so the author did not tell you how she died. You just kind of go along with what the characters know. I hadn't read this book since I was a teenager, so I really didn't know what to expect. I knew it was a classic, you know, as far as historical romance goes. I know she is beloved by millions of people. I just didn't know if I would like it as much the second time reading it as an adult as I did the first time. I really consider it very much a gateway book. So like if you have a teenager or a young teen who just you want to give like a good, clean, barely romantic book without filling their head with too much junk, like this is a great place to start. Any of Janette Oke's books are fantastic for that. So anyway, going into it, I did read her, and I was very pleasantly surprised. Now, I feel like my tastes have sort of deepened in some ways. I like things a little bit more technical. It doesn't offer as much romance as I want now, or doesn't offer as much tension as I like now. Even certain details about the plot are not as intricate as I might like. This is very simple, but like classically simple. And I think that it's the hardest probably gonna be for people to read it if they've seen the movie first. I didn't realize how different this book was from the movies. I mean, it had literally been so long. So if you're expecting like an 8, 9, 10-year-old Missy from the movie, you're gonna get a 1.5-year-old Missy in this book. And normally I hate conversations between adults and children. I think they're silly. I don't think they work. I think adults have a really hard time of pinning down actual childlike talk and thought. But in this book, it was really cute. They did it really good. They did it really good. They did it really well. They didn't really try too hard to capture her exact words, although sometimes they did that. And by the way, she was a little bit advanced for a 1.5-year-old because she could actually talk fairly well, kind of. But still, it was more like as Clark listened to a chattering Missy, blah, blah, blah. Or maybe she said, you know, Mama pretty, or something like that. But it wasn't that dumb, honestly. It's probably the most I've liked any adult to child conversation in a long time. Something else I really liked about the book was, even though it was predominantly narrative or very heavy on the narrative, and I really like dialogue, I felt like the narrative was its strong suit. I think that Janette Oke did a fantastic job skipping over unneeded detail. She was great on the detail that she did give, and she skipped over everything that didn't need to be there, which was fantastic. It wasn't like, and Marty and Clark rode the wagon, and this is what she saw, and there were birds chirping and things on the ground and blah, blah, blah. No. Like, and they left, and it was awkward, and they got there. When they went in, got to the farm, it was like, and there was this and a bunch of nondescript buildings which she wasn't sure what they were. The end. And then they reveal what some of those buildings are as like need to know. If she went to one of them, then they described it. So she didn't spend like an absurd amount of time describing things that you would never get in touch with. She really kept things through the character's eyes. You got to see things as the character got to see things, and you weren't bombarded by things that weren't necessary to the plot. Like, okay, for instance, this neighbor came over, as close as neighbors were back then, like some odd miles away, and she came by and she taught Marty, the main character, how to bake bread. And I was like, oh, here it comes. We're going to get a play-by-play of how to bake bread in the pioneer days. And some people are very interested in that. I just don't happen to be one of them, unless I'm watching a documentary on how to make bread. Then I am interested in it. It depends on what I'm reading and why I'm reading it. So in this case, it basically just said she was going to teach her how to make bread, and then they pulled it out of the oven, and she was so proud of herself. Something to that effect. I was pleased over and over and over again with how she was able to skip from what they were about to do to it being done and staying with the plot of the story. Okay, love that. Something I was not prepared for was how much I would dislike the dialogue. I did not remember how hick, Ozark, backwoods, deep south, I'm not sure what it was. Let me give you an example. There's a good team of horses and a riding horse too, if and ever you want to pay a visit to the neighbors. Ma Graham be the closest, and she's about as good company as anybody be a wantin'. I think you'll find her to your liking, even if she be a lot older than you. Most of my field work is done for the fall, but I do have me a little breaking I aim to do yet if and winter holds off a while. First, though, I plan to spend a few days helping one of the neighbors who ain't through yet. He got him a slow start. It's a little hard. It's a little hard even in your head. I kept being like, can you stop talking? Because if and you don't, I'm gonna have to put down this book. I read a lot of 1-star reviews in that 1%. The majority of them said that they just didn't like the dialogue. It was very distracting, and they didn't, that was annoying. And it was very distracting, and they just didn't care for it. Some of them even claimed that that was not even the way anyone would have talked then. I don't know, and I don't know if these people knew. Maybe they'd seen a lot of movies and decided that this isn't the way they talked, or maybe they read some books or did some history study and decided this wasn't the way they talked. Someone said they were from Texas, and that's not the way people with accents talked, but they weren't from Texas. So I don't know about that. The main one that did get me was that Marty, they said Marty was from the East. Why did she have Clark's accent? True that. She was from the East. I'd forgotten that. And they did put that more into the show. They chose to make Marty in the movie, or the TV show, be a constant sort of correction to Missy, who spoke like her dad. And actually, her dad in the movie didn't really speak with too much of an accent either. But in the book, it's, a lot. So that was one thing. Was there anything else I didn't like about the book? Yes, there was something else I didn't like about the book. And I say this all while saying that I loved the book. I love it the second time. It was a simple read, it was a fast read, but it was beautiful. It was just really, really nice and just a great nostalgic read for me. But I do have to say that Janette Oke stuck to, basically she stuck in the head of one person. So Marty was the POV you got, and she was basically the only POV you got. You really did not get into the head of Clark very much. There were like snippets of that, but I didn't really feel like a personal connection to Clark. If I had it my way, and if Janette Oke was willing, I would say, could you do a rewrite of this with Clark's POV also? That would be like, my wish for this book. Simply because I think it would have deepened the romance level of it. But I think that's also why it is as sweet and simple as it is. You don't get a man's thoughts, especially if you're a young teen reading this book. That's probably when it gets a little too deep, is when you hear what the man's thinking, because he's usually thinking something a little more sensual than the woman's thinking in terms of...
I was wondering if I could have a chip bag.
Yes. Okay. Anyway, the man is usually thinking thoughts that are a little more sensual than the woman. So this really did keep it clean. Now, I don't know the second book, Love's Enduring Promise. I haven't started that one yet. So I don't know if that's going to be the case if you only get one POV, or predominantly one POV. I do think as more characters come into the picture, Marty and Clark's kid, well, Missy, and then Marty and Clark's kids, and on and on and on, because there's 8 books, I believe. I'm sure that the POV expands a little bit. I did open the 5th book, and the dialogue did change a little bit with Marty and Clark's children, or whoever else is in the book. There are other accents that are just pretty much normal, but it did keep Marty and Clark's accent fairly deep. So there's that to look forward to. If you don't like the accent, the other characters do not hang on to it. I wasn't sure, honestly, if I could take 8 books of that accent. It was getting there. So I'd like to read the rest of them, and then I will come back and say how her writing progressed, because keep in mind that Love Comes Softly was Janette Oke's, there's my kitty, Janette Oke's first book. And what's amazing about that is I guess she had decided that when she wrote that book, and it says it on that website that I brought up, that she had said, Lord, if I write this, and if I turn out to be talented at this at all, I will dedicate this all to you. And she felt like the Lord told her, or, as much as we can tell, felt impressed upon her heart that no, whether you're talented or not talented, are you going to do this all for me? And she had to struggle with that and be like, yes, it's all for you, whether I've got something good to put out there or not. And then she put out this first book, and when it went out there, it took off. And it's still selling like crazy. So, you know, I can't criticize it too much because it's a first book. It's amazing. Anyway, that's so awesome. One thing, just for extra credit, that I found out is that the When Calls the Heart series on Hallmark is not actually following the When Calls the Heart series. So if you didn't know that, that should help you out, because when I saw the When Calls the Heart series, I thought, this doesn't really follow the books at all. And I happen to love the When Calls the Heart series from what I remember. And so I was pretty frustrated. But someone said, no, it actually follows a different Canadian series, a continuing story or something like that of a less known series, but they just stuck on the When Calls the Heart name because it was more well known. So if you had a problem juxtaposing those two things, the movies with the books, that should help. I may go back and watch the show with fresh eyes, and maybe I will enjoy it more. But I'm one of those people who don't find the main lead character at all handsome. Don't get mad at me. Okay, I just don't. I don't think he's good looking like at all. I think he kind of looks funny. I just didn't get into it. And I've seen those other two women on different Hallmark shows. I could not picture them in the roles that they were in. I didn't like them as those roles. So I just didn't get into any of the actors at all. But I may try it again. One thing I do remember about the When Calls the Heart book series is that Wynn, I don't even know how to say that name, it's like W-Y-N-N, possibly E. I can't imagine it'd be wine. Anyway, Wynn is perfect. Wynn says everything perfect. He does everything perfect. It frustrates her, but he just kind of ends up being the perfect man. Even Clark is a little bit perfect. She's thinking something, and then he says the thing in answer to her thoughts. So this will do one of two things for your young daughters. Either it will give them the false impression that every man is perfect, and they will not be satisfied with any actual man who is not, or on the positive flip side of that, they will want a very perfect man and set it in their hearts that they will not be satisfied with anything less than somebody who's going to treat them like a lady and who's going to have their best interests at heart. Wherefore, they will pass over many men who don't deserve the time of day waiting for their Prince Charming, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. So it might not be all that bad for our young daughters to feel like there are men who are compassionate. There are men who care about me. There are men who will take care of me and sacrifice their own well-being for me. So there's a lot of books out there where the guy's like a caveman, so you can't really put down the perfect man image too much. I mean, I think it's only sappy for us, like, seasoned women. That sounds awful. Women who are seasoned in marriage, or women who are more mature, who know that men are not that perfect and sometimes wish they were, but quite honestly, we all make mistakes. So anyway, I enjoyed it, so I hope you check out Love Comes Softly, the book. If you have seen the movies but not read the book, please keep in mind they're different. Please keep in mind this was her first book, and it's classically simple and clean and just beautiful in its nature, and you know, try not to judge it too harshly. This is just, she was a pioneer in the Christian romance fiction genre, and we have her to thank for so many other women who then were able to come forward with their beautiful writing and advance it in the ways that they have. So that is my opinion. Next, I am going to review Love on the Line by Deanne Gist. I am so excited. I will also be talking about that book with my friend and fellow author, Bethany Reel, on a separate video that we're going to be doing together, which will be really fun because she hates the male protagonist in that book. I love him. So when I reread it, I loved him twice as much. So we'll discuss that, and it'll be fun, and I hope you join me.